Hey guys, this is BlendMaster here with another tutorial, and as a winter special I was thinking that I'd show you guys how to create this snowflake scene inside of Blender, completely from scratch. So let's get started. First thing we want to do is delete this cube and lamp, and we're going to start modeling our snowflake. And to do that, we'll go to Front View, Orthographic, and I'm going to add a plane and rotate this on the x-axis by 90 degrees. And I'll tab into Edit Mode and subdivide it once. And I'll delete these three outside faces. Then I'll go back to vertex select mode, and I'm going to add a mirror modifier and make sure that clipping is enabled. And this is a quick method I found for creating a snowflake. We're just going to model one end of it first. So just extrude this end all the way up to however long you want, and then we'll add two loop cuts. I'm just going to move these up and scale it on the z-axis, like that. I'll move it down a little bit, and I'll select these two outside vertices. We're going to extrude and rotate up like this. Okay, and this is the point where you can really do anything you want, extrude in any way. You can select these faces and extrude out, or you can extrude in a different direction, but whatever you do here is going to determine your end result for your snowflake. So I'm going to add two more loop cuts, and I'm going to move them down here and scale it on the z-axis like that. And then I'm going to go down like this, and then I'm going to bring it back up. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And I'll tab out of edit mode. Now I'm going to add an array modifier. We're going to uncheck relative offset and check object offset. And then I'll add an empty and make sure it's plane axis. And select that for our object. And you can set this count to whatever you want. Maximum I would go is 8 and minimum 5. And what we want to do is whatever you select, you want to do 360 divided by that number and rotate your empty by that. So I'm going to select 8, and I'll just do 360 divided by 8 right there. That's 45 degrees. So I'll rotate this empty, make sure it's selected, and rotate it by 45 degrees. But what's going on right now is that our plane is already rotated, so we have to apply that rotation first. So select it and press Ctrl A and click rotation. And now we have a nice looking snowflake. Okay, I'm just going to collapse these, and I'll add a solidify modifier, increase that to about 0.5, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier, set that to 2, and add an edge slip modifier. Okay, so that's pretty much it for our basic snowflake now. And what I'm going to do is change the shading to smooth, and then duplicate it and move it to the second layer. And now this is the fun part where we can create variation really quickly. So all you have to do is select in object mode, select the snowflake and then move it around, and you can create some very cool looking snowflakes just like that. And then once you find one you like, just duplicate it and then move it to another layer and do this again. I'm going to create about 5 different snowflakes. You can see how easy it is. Just move it to wherever you want, like that. Okay, one more. And I think that's good. Okay, so now I'm just going to select all 5 layers and then move it to the first layer. whoops, I'm gonna press M and then 1 to move them all to the first layer. And we want to apply the mirror modifier and the array modifier for all of these. Okay, so after I do that, I'm going to hide it just so it's not in our way. So after we do this, we are going to create the background for our scene, which is these glowing snowflakes. Okay, so I'm going to unhide everything. I'm going to press origin to geometry and Alt G. I'm just going to separate these out like that, just so it's easier to see. And now what we want to do is select them all, whoops, and press or scale it down first by 0.1 because at the moment it was pretty big. I'll scale it down again by 0.5 and then press Control, or first I'm going to apply the scale for all of these. Okay, so they should all be at a scale of 1. Okay, that's good. And now what I want to do is make these all a group. So press Control G after you select them all. I'm going to name these snowflakes. And you can also see that because we scaled down our snowflakes, the solidify modifier caused them to be a lot bigger. So I'm going to decrease the thickness. Maybe 0.05 is good. Or 0.1 is better. So then if you want to apply the same modifier to all of these quickly, or edit the solidify modifier, just select all the other snowflakes and then the one that was changed last and press Ctrl L to link the modifiers. And that just makes sure all of the snowflakes share the same modifier. Okay, so that's looking good. Now we'll go to the second layer and add a UV sphere. And what we're going to do is tab into edit mode, rotate this on the x-axis by 90 degrees, go to side view and wireframe, and delete the front half of this sphere, just like that. Then I'll go to front view again, change shading to smooth, and then add a particle system, hair, and I'm going to tab into edit mode and reverse or flip the normals like that, and uncheck emitter, check group and snowflakes. Okay, and I'm just going to go to front view or first layer again, and I'm going to disable the subsurf and solidify modifiers in the preview so that way it doesn't slow down our viewport speed. Okay, and I also want to decrease the amount of particles to about 500, like that. It's still a lot, so maybe 100. And I'll scale this down like that. Random size I'll set to 1, and that's looking pretty good. I'm going to check pick random, and actually I'm going to change it from hair to emitter, and then set the end frame to 1, change the emitter normal geometry to 0, make sure I'm on frame 1, then I'll check rotation and set the randomness all the way to 1 for all of these, and make sure the size is a bit bigger like that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'll increase the number of particles to 250. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is add a material to these snowflakes. It's just going to simply be an emission shader, but first we need to make sure that we're in cycles. And I'm going to open up the node editor, and we want these snowflakes to be a bluish color, but we also want some of them to be lighter. So we'll be using a color ramp and the object info node with its random output to create that effect. Okay, so just plug it in like this, and we want all of these other snowflakes to share the same material. So click the one that has a material last, press Ctrl L, and then link the materials. And now I'm just going to go to the second layer and press Shift Z. And I'm going to change the background color to black, and we'll be able to see our material in action here. So I'm going to change this first color to a blue, like that. Okay, and then I'm going to copy it to the other marker, but I'm going to decrease this saturation to about 0.75 or 0.5. Okay, that's pretty good. Just going to change this blue color a little more, or that. Okay, so that's looking good. Alright, and now what we want to do is go back to our first layer and pick the snowflake that we want to be our main focus here. So I think that this snowflake has the best design, so we'll be using that. And I'm going to duplicate it, move it to the third layer, and we're going to make sure it's not part of our group. And I'm also going to give it a different material, name it Snowflake. And this material is going to be a little complex, but it's not that hard. I'm just going to position the snowflake first, so select both the second and third layer, and then move this to the center of the scene. We're going to scale it down like that, and I'm also going to move our camera to our second layer and third layer and position it. Okay, so I'll position it right about there, and then we're going to have to move our snowflake according to that. So I'm going to rotate on the x-axis and then the z-axis like that, and scale it down right about there. Okay, I'm going to rotate it a little more like that. And I'm also going to enable our solidify modifier, because just to make sure that our thickness is right since we scaled it down. Okay, that's looking good now. And we want to make sure that we add a pass index of 1, which we will be using later in the compositor. And come over to this tab and make sure that the object index pass is enabled. Okay, so now for our material, we'll be using a glass shader. So add glass and plug it in. And we'll also be using textures to create these sparkle effects inside of our snowflake. But first we want to change our roughness to 0.2 and our index of refraction to 1.333, like that. Actually, I'm going to change the roughness to 0.25, and I'm going to add a mix shader. Whoops. And for our factor, we'll be using a texture so that we can create some glittery parts. And first I'm going to add a texture coordinate node, a Voronoi texture, and make sure the object output goes into the vector. I'm going to add a color ramp, and I'll plug it in. And just so we can see what it's doing, I'm going to plug in a emission shader first, and plug that into our surface. And if we press Shift Z, we can see what it's doing. And I'll enable our subsurf modifier too. And we want to increase this size a lot, so I'm going to change it from 5 to 25. And we also want to change it from intensity to cells, so that we get this separated effect. And I'm also going to increase the contrast like this by dragging up the black part and the white part, just like that. Okay, and I'm going to go to wireframe and apply the scale of this snowflake first, and then decrease the thickness again. Change it to 0.05, which looks good. Okay, and go into rendered view again. Okay, and because we changed the scale, we're going to have to change the scale of our Voronoi texture. I'm going to change the scale to 800. And that's what we want, these really fine, small little specks. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm going to decrease our solidify modifier a little more to 0.025. Okay, and things are looking good. So now this is where the complex part begins. We're going to have to create the different colored specks that we see here. The green, blue, red, and white specks, but we have to create them in different areas. So what we're going to do is create different textures. So I'm going to duplicate the texture coordinate over here, and I am going to add a noise texture and duplicate it 2 more times, and add a color ramp again, and I'm going to plug it into this and make sure that both of these markers are close to the middle like that, and I'll duplicate it 2 more times also. And we're going to make sure each noise texture is plugged into the color ramp like that. And then we're going to make sure our object output goes into all of these noise textures as well. I'm just going to add a emission shader again so we can see our texture. Whoops. Okay, so right now at the moment it's pretty big, and I'm just going to change our detail to 0 for all of these. And if you press Ctrl Z over the value and press Ctrl V over the others, it'll paste it, so it improves your speed a little bit. So I'm going to change this first scale to 2. The second one I'll change to 4. The last one I'm going to change to 8. And we want to combine all of these textures so we can create some areas that are white and other areas that are black for different colored sparkles. So what we're going to do is add a mix RGB node, and I'm going to combine the bottom ones first. And we're going to change the factor to 1. Change this to 1 also. And I'm going to plug this into the emission shader so we can see it. Okay, and we'll plug this into the top mix shader. We're going to make sure that these are set to multiply, not mix. And you can see what it's doing. It's taking the white areas in this image and showing it as white in the other image, but the black parts are black. So then when we combine the two, it gives us a smaller space of area. And then when we combine it with the other one, it's also smaller. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this multiply node and plug in the first one with the top one again, but we're going to add an invert node so that its opposite area is given like that. Okay, and I don't want this plugging into that factor. Make sure it's the Voronoi texture. And I'll duplicate this multiply node again, plug in the bottom color ramp and the second color ramp, but add an invert node. Drag both of those down so they're out of the way. Then duplicate the multiply node again and plug in the very top color ramp. Okay, now I'm going to move all of these back, and I'm going to add 4 glossy shaders. But first I want to make sure that the roughness is 0, and just duplicate it 3 more times. Okay, this first color I want to make it pure white. Second one I'll make it red, but change the saturation to 0.75. Third one I will make blue and change the saturation to 0.75. And the last one I'll make it green with a saturation of 0.75. And then I'll add some mix shaders. Combine the first two like that. And then the next one. And the next one. Just like that. And now I'm just going to plug in this last mix shader into the mix shader with our glass shader and plug that into our surface like that. And we'll be using these multiply nodes as the factor for our mixing with the glossy shaders. So let's take this one here and plug it into our first mix shader, this one into the second, and this one into the third like that. And that should be it. So now I'm going to add our light in our scene, and it'll be a simple plane with an emission shader. So delete that, whoops, just delete the diffuse node and add a emission shader, which is white. And we're going to rotate this on the x-axis by 45 degrees. And go to top view, rotate it 45 degrees, or actually rotate it 90 degrees, scale it down by 0.5, and I'm going to make sure that it's under ray visibility, that camera is unchecked, so that way when we render it we don't see a white square in our render. Okay, I'll position it right there. I'll duplicate it and rotate it 180 degrees. Put it right there, then duplicate it again, rotate it like this, so it's right in front of our snowflake like that. And now we can go into rendered view and see our snowflake. Okay, so right now it's looking pretty good, except for our textures are a little messed up. So we can play around with that. I'm going to flip the blue with the white, just because I like the blue better and there's a lot of white showing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is change the scale of these, and I'm going to multiply them all by 4. So first one will be 8, this will be 16, and the last one will be 64. And that's a lot better. We're getting small patches of areas that are red, green, blue, and white. I think I'll double it again just one more time to see. 16, 32, and 64 times 2. Yep, and that's looking good. But right now I think there's still a lot more red, so I'm gonna change the white with the red. And you can really change it so that you get however much of whatever color you want. So that's pretty much it for our material. So now to render out our scene, I'll just render it out quickly at 10 samples. And and we'll head over to the compositor, use nodes, backdrop, control up to go full screen, and control shift left click to bring up the viewer node. Okay, and now we want to separate our background from our snowflake, and same with the snowflake from the background. So we're going to add a converter ID mask, plug in our index object index, plug it into the viewer node. We're going to change this to 1 so it has our snowflake. Press color mix, change it to multiply, and add our original image like that. Okay, now we're going to add a blur to this, and I'm going to change this to fast Gaussian relative Y and 2.5 by 2.5. And I'll duplicate this multiply node, change it to add, plug it in, and then I'll add a filter glare, change it to, or keep it at streaks, high, and 5, and I'll bring down the threshold to about 0.1, I guess. Okay, and 0.2 is looking good. Actually, I'm going to change it from high to low, like that. Bring it up to 0.5. Change the streaks from 4 to 5. And then I'm just going to move all of these up, like that. And I'll duplicate the index object, or the ID mask, with the multiply node. I'll change the index from 1 to 0. Plug in our original image and duplicate this blur node here. Okay, and I'm going to duplicate the add node. Whoops, duplicate the blur node again and change the first one from 2.5 to 5 by 5. We're going to add the two blurs together. Then I'll duplicate the add node again and the blur node and change it from 2.5 to 0.1 by 0.1, I think. Actually, it was 1 by 1. There. And then I'm going to drag all of these back again. Whoops. And I'll add a color hue saturation value node and bring down the value to 0.2, like that. I'll duplicate the add node one more time, plug in the glare node, and then we have our final image. So now if you want, you can increase the brightness of your snowflake or decrease it. First, I'm going to decrease the amount of blur by decreasing the factor value to 0.7, and then I'll duplicate the add node and plug it in, change it to 1. You can see it's a lot brighter, so that's looking good. And you can duplicate it again if you want. I think that's too bright, so I'll just leave it out. And then plug in this last node into our composite node. You can go back, change the samples to whatever you want. I'll set it to 100 and render it, and I'll be back when it's done. Okay, so our image is done rendering, and as you can see, we have our final snowflake here with these little specks of reflection of red, green, blue, and white. And overall, it looks pretty good. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And as a Christmas gift to all of you, or holiday gift for those of you who don't celebrate Christmas, I'll leave a link in the description below so that you guys can download this blend file. So thanks again for watching. If you have any suggestions for future tutorials, feel free to leave them in the comments as well. Thanks for watching.